It took a little longer than we initially expected, but Chris Young is here to stay for the long term. And here's why that's a great thing for the Rangers.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into Chris Young's promotion and long-term extension, what he was doing in Japan, that makes me incredibly excited about the future of the Rangers and their top position player prospect, who is having a great first week in AA. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, the Rangers announced this weekend that Chris Young is here to stay. The former general manager, Chris Young, the hometown Highland Park kid, the former Texas Rangers player turned GM turned World Series champ, is here for the long haul. The Rangers announced during the series against Seattle that Chris Young has signed a multi-year extension and earned a title bump, a well-earned promotion to President of Baseball Operations. Now, what does that title bump mean? Not much. It probably means a pretty hefty pay increase. The general consensus that the going rate for general managers or Pobos or whoever is leading the front office was believed to be around $5 million. I don't know if he got more or less than that. There is no word yet on how many years the contract was. The general consensus, according to Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News, is that deals of this nature are expected to be around 5 years in length. So just the pure guesstimate is 5 years, $25 million. Whatever it was, Chris Young is here to stay. He is going to be here for the long haul. It's a little annoying that it took this long. I was getting a little worried, but Ray Davis was never worried. Chris Young apparently was never worried. This was always the plan, and this is a great sign for the Texas Rangers for now and for years to come. Mainly because the inverse would have been a truly embarrassing and horrific look if you let your very young, homegrown GM, if you will, who has turned this Rangers pitching development apparatus into something that is looking good. Dare I say good? I'll say competent, which is a huge, huge step up from where it had been. And one of the things that really, really great franchises do, really great GMs and Pobos do, Pobo is short for President of Baseball Operations, much more fun to say, and many fewer syllables. But one of the things that those successful head of baseball operations do is they develop homegrown pitching, homegrown starting pitching, to be particular, something this franchise has not done very well, that most franchises don't do very well. It is a very, very difficult thing to do. It is why the Mariners have had a lot of success over the last couple of years. Now, unfortunately for them and their fan base, it hasn't led to postseason success. More fortunate for us. It has been very, very good with the Dodgers. They have done a great job of developing homegrown talent. Now, keeping all of their pitchers healthy, that is another story. The Astros, as unfortunate as they've been, as good as they have been, they've done a great, great job of developing very good homegrown starting pitching. Same with the Rays and the Guardians. Those teams have been very good and very consistent. And the thing that has separated the teams like the Rays and the Guardians from teams like the Astros and the Dodgers is that, teams like the Dodgers and the Astros, they're a little bit more willing to go spend at the top end of the market, somewhere more commensurate with where their team should be, with all the TV money and the other money and everything coming in. And the Rangers have shown the ability and the willingness to spend at the top end of this market. I mean, they bought basically an entirely new rotation before the 2023 season. It ended up leading them to a World Series championship. But Chris Young is worried not just about the first one, but about the second one and the third one and the fourth one and all the championships to come and being sustainably pretty darn good. And this year has been an abject failure in that. This is year 2 at the helm, and it has been a hot mess for Chris Young and company. Granted, there's been a lot more fall off than I think most people could reasonably expect from basically the entire offense. The pitching has done a pretty decent job of holding things together, and he's shown, for the most part, a lot of improvement on the minor league side for this pitching development apparatus. Not just Kumar Rocker, not just Jack Leiter, but guys like Cody Bradford, Alejandro Rosario, guys like Cole Drake, guys like Mitch Bratt, guys like Winston Santos, Emiliano Teodo. There have been just so many success stories in a way that it's hard to name them all quickly in 1 year of the guys who have made these big strides, which is something we have not seen from this organization for a long time. And there have been, some setbacks from the occasional guys. Isaac Tigers, Tommy John surgery, that is very, very frustrating. He was making some big strides this year. There have been, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, the other guy who also started this season on the IL and has missed the entirety of the season with Tommy John surgery. The name is escaping me. Jose Corniel. That's who it is. There has also been that. But for the most part, you go through almost all of the Rangers' top pitching prospects, and there's been significant progress from basically all of them. And that's a hugely great sign for this team. Because if you let this guy go, if you go to the opposite end of the spectrum, which thankfully we don't have to do, I don't think there was ever really that much of a doubt. It's easy to say that now in hindsight, but the fact that it took until the middle of September and his deal was set to expire at the end of the season, we have 12 games left of this season, less than 2 weeks until the season is over. The fact that it took this long just made it a little more nervous. And it would have been a truly terrible look for this team of saying, oh, well, you know what, this young hometown kid who just won us the first championship in franchise history, and we've made a bunch of really nice strides, even though this year as a whole has, at the major league level, has been a failure and a disaster, as they would say. There have been some long-term improvements, and just the winning a World Series alone and letting that guy go would be such a horrible look for a franchise that there would be some questions about, how much Ray Davis is willing to invest, if Ray Davis is willing to invest in this team winning in the long term. A GM, a Pobo, that is an important part of the process. Chris Young wants to be here for the long haul. He is from here, the native Dallas boy. He has got all of the intangibles that you want in a Pobo and a GM. He is the best of both worlds. He is Hannah Montana of Pobos. He is a Princeton grad, one of those smarties with analytics that knows all about the numbers and the whatnots and the who's of McCullots. And he's also a former player who's literally been there and done that. A former pitcher who is a very brilliant guy. He spent time in the Major League Baseball front office working under Rob Manfred. Hopefully not directly, not picking up too much from Rob Manfred, but just learning the ins and outs of Major League Baseball. I mean, he only spent 2 years under John Daniels, learning from him. Before him, the most successful front office member in franchise history. It's not debatable. He built the best teams in franchise history. He was not able to get it across the line. That's Chris Young. He did that. Now, John Daniels set a lot of the framework up, but getting it from 90% of the way there, 95% of the way there of contending team to making the moves that put you over the edge, that is the most difficult thing to do as a front office member, as a person building a team. And Chris Young did that in year freaking 1. He crushed it. It's a great sign of confidence that they have this guy at the helm. I absolutely love what Chris Young has done with this organization. He has been completely instrumental in, one of the most impressive turnarounds we've seen. Hopefully, it's not just a one and done type of thing, but going from how hopeless this team looked in the long haul right around when Chris Young was brought on board in December of 2020, of how barren the farm system was, how much they had not spent in free agency, how little hope for the future there was. Going from that to World Series champions in the span of less than 3 years from the day he signed is incredibly difficult, incredibly impressive, and not just setting them up to be one-and-done champs. I mean, they've got Simeon and Seager here for the long haul. They've got a lot of encouraging signs on the pitching side with Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter and Cody Bradford, and also Jacob deGrom's going to be here for a minute. He's also pretty darn good. And you've got young guys in the lineup that are looking to be your next wave of stars in Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter and Josh Young. And also, we'll get to later on in the show, Sebastian freaking Walcott, who Chris Young was here to sign. But this is an incredibly great week for the Rangers, a great sign for Texas, keeping their homegrown kid, developing homegrown pitchers for the long haul. I am incredibly excited for Chris Young to be here for the long term. And I'm also incredibly excited about the guy that he went to go see. He was not here to make a press conference about this contract extension because he was too busy doing his job and looking for possibly the next great Rangers starting pitcher all the way on the other side of the world. We'll talk about who that is and Sebastian Walcott's leading a not so great hitting development year for the Rangers. We'll talk about all that right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Because unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks invented Flex Play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it is guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. The Rangers take on the Blue Jays tonight, 7:05 p.m. Central Time, first pitch. Nathan Eovaldi versus the vaunted TBD of the Blue Jays. You can catch every pitch of the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, speaking of starting pitchers, a guy who is not going to be starting this week for any Major League Baseball team, maybe not even next year, maybe the year after. We'll see. But Chris Young was not present in the United States to go and talk about his contract extension because he was out busy doing his job, looking for the next great Rangers player that is possibly Roki Sasaki, a right-handed pitcher from Japan who has been the next big thing coming out of Japan for quite some time. He is 22 years old, turning 23 in November of this year, listed at 6'2", 187 pounds. You may remember him from the World Baseball Classic when he came out of the pen for Team Japan, the Samurai, throwing over 100 miles an hour. This guy has got an electric fastball, an electric splitter, an exceptional slider, and he has been basically... He was described in Fangraphs' article by Eric Longhagen as the Japanese LeBron James. Just the guy who has had incredible pressure on him since basically high school as the next big thing. Now, he's not going to be Shohei Ohtani. He does not hit. He just pitches. He might not be as good a pitcher as Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who has been sensational and signed the largest free agent pitcher contract in MLB history this offseason. He did that because he was a little bit older. Once you are 25 or have had 6 years of service time over in Japan, then you are eligible to be just a regular straight-up free agent. You don't have to go through the posting system. But if Roki Sasaki is posted this offseason, which seems to be likely, according to people who know things like that, which is not me, but people smarter than me, more plugged into the Japanese baseball scene than me. It seems like Roki Sasaki is going to be coming over next season. Now, what has he done to make him the next star? Well, outside of throwing over 100 miles an hour, he is the hardest throwing pitcher in the Nippon Professional Baseball League history. He has also been putting up sensational numbers every year in his minor league or his Japanese league career. He has pitched in 4 seasons so far at the highest level, a 2.05 career ERA, 398 and 2/3 innings, 504 strikeouts, 2 walks per 9, 11.5 strikeouts per 9, or 11.4, and 0.4 home runs per 9. This is something that really intrigued me about him, is how few home runs he's allowed the last couple of years. In the last 2 years, he's pitched 91 and 95 innings. He has allowed 3 home runs in that span. 3. That's it. Just 3 home runs in over 180 innings. 186 innings. He has allowed 3 home runs. Now, there are some concerns about him this year. The walk rate is up. The strikeout rate is down still. A very, very good 10.3 strikeouts per 9 in Japan. And that is very, very good. It is because in Japan, the strikeouts are more of a big deal than they are in the States. So the swing and the miss, your stuff has to be very, very nasty. Hitters over there are really trying to avoid the strikeout much more than hitters stateside. So those strikeout numbers can go way up. Even though he is going to a harder league, those strikeout numbers routinely go up, as we saw. Go look at some of Yu Darvish's strikeout numbers from when he was in Japan versus what he did in the States. But there have been some concerns with injuries because, of course, he is a pitcher, and they have those things, and they are... no pitcher is injury-free, especially when you are that touted as a youngster. I feel like a lot of these pitching injuries for these high-profile pitchers can become more of an epidemic because so much pressure and so many pitches are thrown as young players. I mean, he had a 190-plus pitch complete game in high school, which is absolutely terrifying to me that he would have that kind of a workload at that age. I mean, he has been throwing routinely over 80 innings in his pro career. The most he's thrown as a pro was in 2022, his age 20 season, 129 and a third innings. The Japanese baseball season is just about as long as the Major League Baseball season, not quite as many games. So you're not going to see too many pitchers over there throwing 180 or 200 innings. He missed some time last year with an oblique injury. He has missed some time this year with an undisclosed arm injury, which is always spooky that they are undisclosed, and an arm injury, which makes me fear the worst, that it's an elbow injury. The velocity has been down significantly on all of his pitches this year, down 2 miles an hour basically on the fastball, which, by the way, down 2 miles an hour is still averaging 96.7 miles an hour to kind of give you an idea of how ridiculous his stuff is. The swing and miss rate has been cut in half on that fastball from a 24% whiff rate on a fastball, which is really darn good, to just a 12% whiff rate, which is not as good. On the fastball. The strikeout rate has gone down. The swing and miss rate, the chase rate on all of those pitches has also gone down. Now, he's come off of the IL and looked much better as of late, but still there are some concerns there, especially with him having such incredibly high workload in high school of how many pitches he was throwing, and not just in that one complete game. But when he is on his game, he is as good as anybody. I mean, we saw that in the World Baseball Classic. I mean, you come out of the pen, you're like, who? They're like, okay, some people have heard of Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He had been pretty established at that point. You kind of knew about that guy, Shohei Ohtani. People generally had an idea of who that guy was. You also kind of knew Yu Darvish at that point, pretty well established stars. And then Roki Sasaki comes out of the pen chucking 102, and you're like, huh? Who the heck is this guy? When can we get him in a major league game? Well, it's seeming like this is going to be the offseason that happens. The Rangers have a decent chunk of change in their international bonus pool money, but that is for next year. They have around $6 million. The posting system works that if he is signed before, I believe, January. Teams will have to use their bonus pool from this year. And he is not going to just get a 12-year, $300 million contract offer like Yoshinobu Yamamoto did. He would have to wait another year, actually 2 more years, in order to reach that threshold of 6 professional years and being 25 years old. So I don't think that he is going to wait that long, especially with the injuries popping up. His team in Japan would very much like to get a hefty posting fee while he is still at the peak of his value. Every year he gets older, every year that there are more injuries that come out, there will be more concerns and less of a chance that they get a big old check in the posting fee. Now, obviously the Dodgers are the favorites, but we've seen what Chris Young can do in terms of sweet-talking free agents to sign with the Rangers. We saw it with, of course, Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, and that was coming off of a 100-loss season. We also saw them sweet-talk Bruce Bochy out of retirement and convince Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi to sign here. We've seen him make some great trades at the deadline. He just seems like a very, very convincing guy, and I think that is probably his greatest asset as a GM, is his ability to convince free agents and potential people trying to join. He's trying to convince to sign with his team of why his vision is so good. And now he has a World Series ring to kind of back that up and throw on the table of like, hey, you want to come win here? Because we won before. And also I think it'd be a nice pitch to Roki Sasaki instead of saying, hey, you'll be the 3rd most famous Japanese pitcher on your team if you sign with the Dodgers. Here, you're the guy. I don't know. It is definitely something the Rangers are considering. It will be less expensive than going and chucking, $180 million at Corbin Burns. Definitely some risk there, but someone to keep an eye on for the future and something that I will be watching very, very closely this offseason. Something I won't be watching this offseason, but have been watching this year is another potential future star for the Texas Rangers. That's right, it's Bam Bam Sebastian Walcott, who got called up to Double A. We're talking about what he's done this year, why it's so impressive, and some other hitters who have made me think, okay, maybe they're going to be mashing in big leagues with the Rangers next season. Right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different from you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Right now, FanDuel's got a lot of great odds. Right now, I'm looking at the American League Rookie of the Year odds. Still not seeing Wyatt Langford up there. Right now, the favorite, Luis Gil, the pitcher for the Yankees at plus 120. The next favorite is Austin Wells, catcher of the Yankees, plus 175. And Colton Cowser, after a great start to the season, falling to 3rd favorite at plus 210. So head over to FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. Now, hitting has been a problem for the 2024 Texas Rangers. You can stop me if you heard me say that before. You definitely will be stopping me if you listen to even probably one episode of this podcast. You know that hitting has been a problem for the Texas Rangers, and it has not just been at the major league level, it has been at the minor league level as well. Heading into this year, it seemed pretty clear that the Rangers, for the most part, for many, many years in the past, hitting prospects have been something that Texas has developed much, much better than pitching prospects. And this year, that has pretty much flipped right on its head with the breakouts of Kumar Rocker, Alejandro Rosario, Jack Leiter's progress, Teodo, all those guys who I just mentioned before. And for the most part, there were some hitters who I was really excited about seeing this year and seeing what they could do. But in general, it has not been a very inspiring year for bats on the farm. Justin Foscue has gotten not quite as much run as maybe he would have liked at the major league level, but the results have been truly terrible. There have also been guys lower on in the levels that I was expecting to make a little bit more strides. Paulino Santana has had a decent season, but only played 53 games and didn't come over stateside. He was the Rangers' top signee this year. There have been other young guys like Yofran Castillo, who has had a decent season. Braylon Morel has had a pretty darn good season, still very, very far away. Echedri Vargas, his first year in full season ball, has been putting up solid, not spectacular numbers in low A, as a 19-year-old in low A playing shortstop and second base, and looks like a legit middle infielder with some pop, but not anything that's really blowing you away. And you look up and down this farm and the hitters, there's not really been a whole bunch that really blows you away. Unless you look right at the top in Sebastian Walcott, a.k.a. Bam Bam, the 6'4 shortstop signed out of the Bahamas, out of Nassau, given a $3 million signing bonus back in the class of 2023. This is his second pro season. He turned 18 a few days before I turned 30. Literally 3 days before I turned 30. March 18th, he turned 18. So he is not even, actually, tomorrow is his half birthday. So he will be 18 and a half tomorrow. And already he has spent the final week of the season in Double A Frisco. Started the year with High A Hickory, a very, very aggressive assignment for the youngster. And all he did was put up a 786 OPS on the season after a truly pretty bad first couple of months. I mean, it was a very, very aggressive assignment. He had spent 9 whole games in the Dominican Summer League before the Rangers realized he can't learn anything here because everyone's so terrified to pitch to him that he's not going to get any opportunities to get better. And then he went to the Arizona Complex League, and he absolutely crushed it there in 35 games. And then he spent 4 whole games in Hickory at the end of last season, completely jumping by low A as a 17-year-old, and looked okay in Hickory. And I thought the Rangers might start him in Hickory this season. I thought that would be a pretty aggressive assignment, but he is a guy who has got that makeup. He's wired differently. He is wired for a challenge. And in 116 games at Hickory, finished with a 786 OPS, 10 homers, 9 triples, 31 doubles. Still a lot of strikeouts, but a walk rate over 10%. That was incredibly encouraging. And then his first 5 games in Frisco, the youngest player in Double-A this season, 6.2 years younger than the average position player in the Texas League. Those 5 games, he's hitting at .348, on base of .375, slugging .609, a .984 OPS in that first week of Double-A. Kid's pretty darn good. He's going to be 19 next year. He is almost assuredly going to be the starting shortstop for the Double-A Frisco Rough Riders as a 19-year-old. The only other guys who have done that, Elvis Andrus, Jurickson Profar, former All-Stars, pretty darn good players. Now, I think his ceiling is higher than either of those guys ever was. And Profar was a number 1 overall prospect in baseball. Now, that was more about his floor, which fell out because of injuries and unforeseen circumstances. But Walcott's floor is still pretty low. There's still a chance that Double-A overwhelms him, but I'm less thinking that's going to happen. I think there's less of a chance of that happening. And he's 6'4". He's a shortstop. He's a bit bigger as a shortstop than your average shortstop. He profiles more of a third base / right fielder, but I think he can definitely stick at shortstop. Now, will he? I'm not entirely sure. Will he eventually move to the outfield and right field? I think that's most likely of where he plays in the long term. And as for when he makes his big league debut, I mean, he'll tell you that he wants to be a teenager in the big leagues. He wants it to happen next year. And I wouldn't put it past the kid because of his intangibles, because he has been so darn impressive. I think that is less likely. I think aiming for an early 2026 debut, spending all of next year in Frisco, or maybe spending a little bit of time in AAA Round Rock would be a great, great season for him next year. And he's probably going to struggle early on next year because Double-A pitchers are very darn good. He still expands his strike zone a bit much, but he's got a good eye. He's got all the raw tools in the world. Definitely the best arm in the system in terms of raw throwing ability, not pitching wise, but in terms of arm strength, it is truly a sensational arm. The raw power is off the charts. I mean, he's putting up exit velocities of 115, 116 miles an hour, which is about what Adolis Garcia's max exit velo is this year. And despite the overall numbers from Adolis Garcia this year, the exit velos have been exceptional. And that is absolutely unheard of an 18-year-old putting up that kind of exit velocities. So he has been an incredibly encouraging sign. Some other guys who I've been pretty encouraged by is the second halves of guys like Blaine Krim. These two guys specifically, Blaine Krim and Abimelec Ortiz. I think that Blaine Krim, there's an outside shot he gets a DH spot with the Rangers next year. I really do. I mean, when you're a first base prospect, you have one path to the big leagues, and that is hit like crazy everywhere against everyone all the time. And it is a difficult thing to do. The first half for Blaine Krim was not great, but in the second half, 63 games, a slash line of 345, 425, 580, an OPS north of 1,000 with 12 home runs. And Abimelec Ortiz was a guy who I saw a couple of times in the first half, and I didn't really know what to make of him. I mean, he is a first base prospect. He has played in the outfield, but he is a first base / DH type. Had a sensational season last year with 40 bombs as a minor leaguer. Difficult to do. But this year, I was watching the at-bats in the first half, and the results weren't there, but the process was pretty darn good. He didn't look overmatched, but the numbers just were not very good. A 556 OPS in 57 games in the first half for Abimelec Ortiz. The second half, 58 games, a 949 OPS, including 13 of his 18 home runs. He is hitting over 300 with an on-base over 400 and slugging over 500. The vaunted 345 triple slash line that I really love to see in a hitter. Truly a sign of an elite hitter, a guy who can put the ball in play, get those singles, get that batting average up, drive in runs. Also getting on base at a 400 clip, very difficult to do, and slugging over 500, showing he's still got those extra base hits in him as well. I've been encouraged by those guys and Alejandro Ozuna as well. As for Ozuna's long-term home, well, he has been crushing it in 57 games as, a 21-year-old in Double-A, a 902 OPS in those 265 plate appearances with 18 homers overall on the season in over 100 games and 5 triples, a 869 OPS for the season for Ozuna. I'm not entirely sold on him as an everyday starter in an outfield role, but you hit like that with that kind of power, with that kind of on base, with that kind of speed, and pretty decent defense out there in center field, you might just work your way into an everyday role. He has really put himself on people's radar this year. I would not be surprised to see him make his major league debut at some point next year. He has been an encouraging sign, and overall, not super encouraging year for the bats, but of those bats, Sebastian Bam Bam Walcott making this kind of strides, showing he really is that dude, almost makes up for all of the rest of the frustrations with the bats, at least on the minor league side this year. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.